Joining me now live in Cairo, just about a 3.5-hour plane ride away, Eddie Yeranian. Eddie's being monitored by the Egyptian government. They don't like him much, but we do, so that's why he's on our show. Eddie Yeranian, the voice of America in Egypt and Cairo, and a longtime CBS correspondent. Great to hear you.
Thank you, John. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. And somebody asked me about the weather here, Edward. I guess in August, I understand it gets pretty hot here. We're in the southern part of the Gulf, but today, 85 degrees, a breeze blowing, beautiful weather.
That's about what we have here in Cairo. That's what the weather is bringing us today, too.
It is going to get hot, though. They said don't come back in August. It averages in August and September at the middle of the day, $125 Fahrenheit. That's 125 degrees. That's pretty hot, isn't it? Is that really?
Yeah.
Does it really average 125 degrees?
Insufferable. Well, in centigrade, they usually say once it goes over 50, I think that's about where you're talking about. I don't know the conversion chart, but they had a couple, I think it was 2 years ago, a picture of Kuwait and a thermometer saying 53. I think that's getting close to 130.
Yeah, I think the conversion 50 is 125, somewhere in there, 120, 125. So pretty hot, no question about it. So, look, I want to get your comments on this Qatari blockade situation. I've been here now, Edward, for 4 days. I've talked to very high-ranking government officials, both on the record and off the record. And the blockade, including which Egypt is a part of, economically, this thing has backfired. It's blown up in their face because Qatari is better off economically now than they were when the blockade was started.
That's possible. I'm not on the ground to judge as you are, but I think what people are neglecting are the reasons for this action that the other countries took, and Qatar, what those reasons are.
Well, there's 4 key reasons, and so let's go over them because I've talked about them ad nauseum, and then I want to get on to the Egyptian elections, which are coming up. So, look, just to run them down, there's 4 key reasons, and I'm summing it up and simplifying it, but we're on the radio, and number 1, they said that they don't like the fact that Qatar is cozying up to Iran. Iran is destabilizing the region. That's bad. Number 2, they said that the Qatar government does not want to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. In fact, they are supporters and friends with the Muslim Brotherhood, and they do nothing to dissuade the Muslim Brotherhood's growth in the region. Number 3, they said they are covertly funding terrorist organizations and terror and Islamist extremism. And number 4, they say that they're funding Al Jazeera Network, which is fomenting dissent and riling up the most extreme elements of jihadism. And, Al Jazeera has become a recruiting tool. Those are the 4 basic things that they're saying, right? Have I basically summed those up?
Yes. If you listen to that from where from where your audience is sitting, it probably sounds very innocuous. But in practice, it's a lot worse than that. The Muslim Brotherhood, why is it that these countries are against the Muslim Brotherhood? Now, ask yourself, they want a caliphate. Do you want a caliphate? Does your audience want a caliphate? Mr. Obama and his administration seem to have no problem with that. Mr. Brennan, the CIA director, worked hand in glove with the Turks and with the Qataris, and they are the main parties who want to see a caliphate along with the Muslim Brotherhood. They are both Muslim Brotherhood supporters, the Turks and the Qataris. And who are the Qataris' most solid allies? The Turks, Mr. Erdogan. Now, he wants to be caliph, according to the Arab media. I haven't asked him, but that's what everyone says. And also, the Qataris are close to the Democratic Party. Now, that means they support Hillary. They gave money to the Clintons. They gave money to Obama. Okay, well, they're put it this way. They're the opposition to what many in your audience support. They are Egypt's adversary too. They are Saudi Arabia's adversary. This morning, Saudi Arabian-owned Al Hayat newspaper says on page 2, it says, plan to extirpate Muslim Brotherhood ideas from Saudi schools. Now, it's a big thing to them. They don't want to have the Muslim Brotherhood flourishing in their society. Why? Because they don't tell the truth. I mean, we've seen that here in Egypt. I mean, they say one thing, they speak with forked tongue. They tell you one thing and they do another. Now, according to their ideology or theology, I guess that's okay, because if you're talking to people who are infidels, it's okay to tell less than the truth. So to them, it doesn't bother them. But unfortunately, you don't have a lot of people who are confronting them with this.
So
Edward,
so the Qatari response to this was the response today, because I asked that question after we talked, basically to the Minister of Energy and Industry, Dr. Mohammed bin Salah al-Sada. So I asked him that question directly, and here's what he said to me. He said, that's nonsense. And he said, look, it doesn't make any sense. He said, you've been here for 5 days. We have empowered women, right? No question about that. We have an open and free media. No question about that. We are allowing our people tremendous freedom of thought, expression, and movement. You've seen that just on the street. We are consistently ranked in the Peace Index as the top country for safety in, what did he call it, MEAN, which is Middle East and North Africa, MENA. He said, you've seen for yourself that our economy is such that you can buy anything or not buy anything. There's complete openness to that. We allow our citizens to buy guns to hunt. You have to go through a process, and there's a background check, but we allow that. And he said, why would we have all these freedoms and then support radical jihadism, which wants to tear all those freedoms down? Why would we be doing that? Why would we be investing into education with, 6 major U.S. universities? Why would we have a major U.S. military base in our country? Why would we be negotiating with the U.S. for a big naval base? Why would we be doing this and then giving money to support terrorists? He says it doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's a pretty strong argument to me. And he said, how would that get reconciled? How would you do all that and then be giving money to terrorists? He said, how would that make any sense? Why would you do that? What's your answer to that?
Well, John, as you do, I try to deal in facts and information.
Right.
The bigger questions we can ask, and that is a good question to ask, but on the ground, we have people who are saying they are supporting terrorists. The former UN envoy to Libya, Tariq Mitri, the Lebanese, he's 2 envoys ago, said on the BBC Arabic service, point blank, that 2 countries were supporting terrorists in Libya. He didn't name them, but it was clear whom he meant, and he meant the Turks and the Qataris, who are both allies, and they're both allies of Sudan also, which is the country that all the Arab media is accusing of funneling weapons through Libya to the terrorists. Also, a Turkish ship was stopped by the Greek Navy about a month and a half, 2 months ago, carrying arms ostensibly to Misrata, which is a Muslim Brotherhood stronghold in Libya. So why are they doing it? I really don't know. Why did they support Hillary? Why did Hillary support the Muslim Brotherhood? I don't know that either. It doesn't make a lot of sense that a woman who went to Yale Law School would be supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. It makes no sense. If you ask that question and said, well, on the surface of it, why would she be doing that? It doesn't make sense. I don't know. But I do know a lot of fishy things happen in the world. I've been a journalist, I guess, for 35 years now, as I'm sure you have almost as well. And I see things I just can't reconcile with logic. I mean, why did the U.S. support the non-recognized government in Tripoli while saying from the other corner of its mouth that it supports unity and one Libyan government? And yet Mr. Brennan of the CIA was supporting the unrecognized Islamist prime minister in Tripoli. And we knew that for a fact because there was a terrorist operation against the hotel where he had his office. And security firms from Virginia were protecting him. Now, they don't do that unless they have clearance from the CIA. So why would they be doing that? I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. A lot of things don't make a lot of sense. Why was Mr. Brennan and Mr. Clapper trying to pull down President Trump? He was elected. And yet they came up with this fishy, concocted story about Russia hacking the elections. And we're still dealing with that. So, I think Mr. Brennan worked with the Qataris and with the Turks. They worked with terrorists in Syria and Iraq. Mr. Brennan was working with the people who were working with Daesh, with the Islamic State group. Why is that? I don't know. Ask him. Why don't you ask Mr. Brennan? Get him on the air.
Well, I might just do that. I will try to get him on the air. I mean, look, I appreciate your passion in this, no question about it. But there are a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of things that really don't make any sense at all. Now, let's turn our attention to Egypt. The Egyptians go to the polls next week in what is essentially a one-candidate election, considered by critics to be a return of sorts to the old authoritarian military rule after the 2011 revolution and the whole bit and coup d'etat. So, the big picture, the Middle East as a whole, democracy has failed. There's no democracy. I guess, Edward, from Morocco to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf Emirates states, the one that I'm in, Qatar, it's a kingdom. There's no free elections going on. Monarchies have proven more stable than places that experiment with democracy, Egypt being one of them. So Egypt's President El-Sisi is following a model that basically you take over and then you consolidate power and you have an election which is a facade, which is probably going to go on in Egypt. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of dissent in Egypt the way there was during the Arab Spring. So help us understand that.
Well, the main dissent came from the Muslim Brotherhood, which was the main opposition to former President Mubarak. They are now outlawed, so they're out of the picture, at least domestically. And the rest of the opposition is pretty much splintered. They don't agree on a lot of things, so they don't form a cohesive pressure group opposing the parties that are running the government. And I think as a student of history, it's fair to point out that Egypt has never been a democracy. Egypt has pretty much always been ruled by military leaders. The Mamluks were military leaders that ruled Egypt under the Turkish Ottoman Empire. The last dynasty of Egypt, Muhammad Ali Pasha, who ruled from 1805 to 1849, he was a military ruler. He was appointed the military governor of Egypt by the Sultan. He tried to rebel against the Sultan and become Sultan himself, but failed. But anyway, and his ancestors, his descendants, ruled up until King Farouk was deposed by the army. And there again, you have military rulers. You have President Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser, from 1952 to 1969. General Nasser, Colonel Nasser. Then Sadat, Anwar Sadat, who was also a military man. He was Nasser's vice president. And he ruled until he was shot by Islamic militants in 1980, I want to say 81, maybe it was 82, my memory is failing me. But anyway, and then President Mubarak, who was the head of the Air Force, who was Sadat's vice president, who took over and ruled until the revolution in 2011. And a lot of Egyptians will tell you, whether it's true or not, that the revolution was something that was concocted from the outside. I mean, there is some evidence to prove to suggest that. I couldn't prove it. I'm not even going to try to prove it. But a lot of people, educated Egyptians, say that President Obama was trying to get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood from the day he took office, trying to get rid of President Mubarak, that is. When he came to speak here in Cairo at Cairo University, I remember the front rows of the Cairo University auditorium were filled with Muslim Brotherhood people. That was President Obama's people inviting Muslim Brotherhood people to the front rows of his speech. So, I mean, that's a clear indication right there that there was some sort of collusion or at least sympathy between the Obama administration and the Muslim Brotherhood. And there are a lot of Egyptians who will also claim that President Obama belongs to the Muslim Brotherhood. Once again, I couldn't prove that, nor would I even bother to try. But they're people who insist until they're blue in the face that that's true. They point to his half-brother Malik, who is a Muslim Brotherhood operative who knows the Sudanese dictator, who is a fairly large mucky-muck in the Muslim Brotherhood himself, who also works with Turkey and Qatar, who are also Muslim Brotherhood supporters. So there are a lot of Muslim Brotherhood connections here which nobody wants to talk about. So whatever the truth is, the media avoids talking about facts which are very important. And if you avoid talking about them, how can you ever get to the truth, whatever that may be, assuming we don't know what the truth is, unless you talk.
All right, Edward, you're gone and we're out of time. John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth. We'll be right back. Stay with us live. Doha, Qatar.